Hello and welcome back to the Opposites Abroad podcast, a podcast about all things travel. Charlie Bosco here with my good friend TT down in Denver. And if my sound is a little bit compromised, I apologize. I am traveling right now. I'm in Toronto, and I brought a slightly reduced audio setup with me. So apologies if I'm a little bit echoey and if you hear sirens and people shouting and the normal soundtrack that comes with being downtown in a big city. TT, you ever been up here, Toronto?
You know, actually, I have not. I was supposed to go last year and it just kind of fell apart, but I've always heard we were talking off. Do we say off camera or off what or before this started?
Off mic.
Off mic. And I would actually really like to go to the Royal Ontario Museum. I heard it's just awesome. So I will go at some point.
Yeah, sadly, I got in late last night. I'm going to be in a big glass, one of the many hundreds of big glass buildings in Toronto all day, 9 to 5. And then on the last day, I'll just go from that back to the airport. So I fear I'm not going to see much, but I just went for a nice, well, is running ever nice? I went for a run. I haven't got much cartilage left and there's a lot of snow, so I don't think I was setting any records, but went for a bit of a run and kind of at least got to see the harbour front, CN Tower, went past the Rogers Centre and some of the cool buildings on Queen Street. So I've seen a little bit, going to a Raptors game on Wednesday, so trying to get something out of my visit so I'm not just in a hotel or an office building. But yeah, sadly, I don't think I'm going to collect enough information for us to do a podcast anytime soon.
What's in that huge tower? The Space Needle.
The CN Tower?
Yeah.
Good question. I bet there's a viewing deck. I know how you love going up tall buildings to look at things.
I really love if I have to pay a bunch of money to go up and look around for 5 minutes. Like that's really
the best. Hey?
Or wait in line for a long time. That's really fun.
You won't like this, but I actually really enjoyed going up the Tokyo Tower.
Oh, did you?
Just because Tokyo's the biggest city in the world, and you just get it's when you're high up, because I haven't been that many places in Tokyo where you can get really high up, and to be above it, you really got the scale of it for the first time. But as a general rule, I agree that going up tall buildings and looking at other things isn't the most exciting. So today we are talking about a topic which feels surreally far away given my current surroundings. We're talking about dream road trips. We did an episode a couple of weeks ago about how to road trip and a few tips and tricks. And today we are running through dream road trips. Some of them we've already done, some of them we'd like to do. I don't know how we order this. Go ahead. Go on. Name some of your favorite road trips you've ever been on that you'd recommend to people.
You know, I've actually been on a lot of road trips, but in the U.S. The only kind of one I did out of the U.S. is I went through Tuscany region of Italy, which I found super, super irritating because of all the constant toll roads, and I felt like you never really get in a rhythm, and toll roads are not my favorite. And there's some pretty decent ones in the U.S. too, but most of them now are pretty automated, where you just drive through and they'll bill you later, even if you're out of state. So it's not as annoying as it is like in Italy. But I really haven't done a lot in other countries, but there's not a lot of countries that are as big as the United States. So I think when you talk about road trips, the U.S. is just kind of the perfect road trip place. I'll tell you,
the U.S. is designed for it. And just quickly on that Italy thing, the toll roads are so annoying because every time you sort of change highways, you go through another toll booth, and sometimes they charge you 70 cents or something. In France, I used to live in the French Alps, and if I drove from Calais, I used to get off the ferry from the UK in Calais, take a ticket, and then when you come off at Geneva, you just pay it in one go.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would make me wince because it'd be 80 euros or something. Yeah. But yeah, in Italy, it's really annoying, and the roads are small, and I don't want to stereotype, but the drivers are not the most considerate people in the world. So I agree, and the States is made for it.
Yeah, and I could go on forever about how much I hate toll roads. But I'll tell you one road trip I really, really want to do, an international one, is I want to drive all the way through the middle of Australia.
Okay,
I
I've got one.
I
We've
think
got
it'd
our
be
list, and
awesome.
I've got one on Australia.
I would love to do that and see all the just those weird little towns in the middle of Australia. I think would be so cool. I would yeah. It seems like one of the few dangerous type thing road trips you can really do. So I would love to do
Well,
that.
tell you what. Let's do it by geography. We've already mentioned the states. In some ways, the states is so set up for road trips, as you say. There's big roads, open roads, not many people. Once you're between population centres, um, you can choose to go off and camp, and you'll find endless wilderness. You'll also find kind of funky little towns and motels all along the way. So it is a country designed for road tripping. What have some of your favourites been?
Well, I'll ask you this first. Is it weird being a Brit and having to drive on the other side of the road?
I'm just used to it. I've lived outside England
God,
since 2007.
I don't like I've always heard, and I think Ireland would be really cool road trips, but I just feel like I would get in a head-on collision in like 5 minutes.
It's fine until you get to a roundabout. That's when it gets really confusing. Yeah, but I mean, I've lived outside England for 18 years, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just used to driving on the right. Sometimes when I'm in England, I pull out and I drive on the right and have to kind of snap myself back.
I think if I'd need my passenger to be just yelling constantly, stay on the left.
Yeah, because it wasn't on my list, but there was the west coast of Ireland, from Cork, Limerick, up through Galway and Sligo. I think I've always wanted to do a drinking trip up the west coast of Ireland. Just
Like a drinking and
pull
driving
into
trip.
not combined. Pull in some tiny little village and find the only check into some crappy hotel and find the only pub in town and basically go and have some fun drinking with the locals. I think that would be awesome. But yeah.
Yeah, that does sound fun.
But the US, come on. I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for these
Oh,
favorites.
for the best U.S. road trips, I think there's. I mean, we kind of talked about it in a previous podcast. I think through Texas, Route 66 is kind of the famous one. Pacific Coast Highway through California is another really famous one. That's beautiful. Then there's other ones that I think are things that people should do once in their life. Driving to Key West. So like going Miami, all those bridges all the way to Key West is I feel like something everybody should do at least once in their life.
I heard I've never been down there, but I heard the Keys aren't that, like the towns aren't that nice. Is that right?
No, they're not. But they're interesting. In Key West, there's Hemingway's house. There, it's the architecture is really known for the style that it is. I mean, you like bars and stuff. There's some really cool bars in Key West that people drank in the 50s and that Hemingway would have drank in. I think that stuff is really cool. There's some stuff I would love to do. Like, I'd love to drive from Denver to Alaska and drive through the 51st state and then get to Alaska and really check out Alaska.
Yeah, we're referring it to as Trump Canada from now on. If you don't mind.
So I think that would be really cool. You know, I think you and I are similar in some ways, and one is just if we got in a car and drove in any direction, we would find cool stuff to see.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's always cool stuff. There's presidential libraries, or there's state capitals, or there's weird museums, or there's great food. You know, I know that, you know, we both like barbecue, so doing like a barbecue road trip would be awesome.
Yeah, we've made a list of favorite road trips and dream road trips, and the barbecue tour of the Deep South. Actually, you'd be the perfect person to go with, so I'll say with you.
That would be fun.
So fun. And I'd love to combine it with college football.
Yeah.
Like to go to Ole Miss,
Yeah.
and Texas A&M and Louisiana and just University of Alabama and go to college football in all these kind of small old towns and also eat a ton of barbecue. That is so high on my dream road trip list. I think that would be super fun.
Yeah, and for people, especially people that aren't from the United States, barbecue is so regional in the U.S. of different styles of the sauces, of the meats, of how it's smoked or cooked, that every place is so different that when you do that, Memphis is different than Texas, is different than Lexington, North Carolina. Like, it's all these different things, and it'd be really fun. I would love to do that too.
All right, well, that's on the dream road trips. We've already mentioned the Keys, Texas. If I could add a US road trip to the list. Sorry, by the way, if you can hear that ambulance outside. One thing about cities is it's never quiet. It drives me insane. I'm lying in bed and there's no such thing as silence. I've got this white noise app on my phone.
So I kind of like the noise. I like listening to gunshots and screams and stuff when I'm sleeping.
I mean, if it's something interesting like gunshots and screams, I can live with it. It's just when it's ambulances and homeless people fighting, that's a struggle. But no, adding one to the US list. The first time I ever went to the US, we drove from Calgary over the border through Glacier National Park and ended up over the course of about 3 weeks going through Montana, Wyoming, so Yellowstone, Teton, made it as far as the Great Salt Lake. Little underwhelmed by Yellowstone, despite it being the most famous national park of all and the first national park. But just the sheer scale of cowboy country in Montana, Wyoming.
Yeah.
And they call Montana Big Sky Country. And it was just amazing to finally see that for myself. And I just think it's one of those places that, that cowboy country, Wyoming, Montana, is just not really like anywhere in the world. And the scenery is incredible. The ambience is amazing. Really fun people. So I would totally add that to the list. But Yellowstone, despite being the most famous place we went, was probably kind of the least interesting. I'd say Glacier's pretty cool. And also we checked out some of the wilderness areas, like the Bob Marshall Wilderness in Montana, which is apparently bigger than the English county of Yorkshire, which is just blows my mind. So yeah,
do they have their own
that's
pudding?
my US recommendation. Did they have their own what?
Do they have their own pudding?
Yeah, there's Yorkshire pudding and then Bob Marshall Wilderness pudding.
Good, because you really haven't made it until you have your own pudding. I feel like.
No, that's true. I mean, one day hopefully someone will make a tribute Opposites Abroad podcast.
Do you like blood pudding?
Do you like black pudding?
Is it called blood pudding or black pudding?
No, it's black pudding.
Oh, it's okay.
I think it's so that you don't know what it's made of. It's like it's the reason they call pork and not just pig. It sort of reminds you. It doesn't seem as bad to eat it if you say it's black pudding.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. What do you like it?
I'm not into it.
You're not into it?
No, I'm not into it.
Okay.
No, because I can't separate from my brain that I'm eating clotted blood.
Yeah.
We're not going. If we did that road trip down the west coast of Ireland, you'd need to eat some black pudding.
I know. I think I'd rather do a barbecue tour than a black pudding tour. I think if I had to pick, but and I would say if you're gonna do these kind of rural America road trips like Yellowstone and seeing these national parks, if you can really go outside of tourist season, even in risk worse weather, it's worth it, because they are absolutely horribly crowded in the summer, and you've got to get a lot of times you've got to get passes or permits beforehand to go there. I tell you, another one that my son just did recently that he absolutely loved was he did Death Valley.
Okay.
And he did it.
That would be amazing.
And he did
Don't want to
it.
break down with no water.
Yeah, and he did it in the winter, so it wasn't 1,000 degrees. But he absolutely loved that, and that's one I've never done. But he was really surprised at how much he loved that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got to add California to the
Grand
list,
Canyon.
down the coast of California. Yeah, Grand Canyon. And then also a quick shout out for one of my favorite places to hike, bike, ski, which is to Cascades. I think driving the Cascades of Washington is pretty special. And you do a pretty cool loop, kind of Mazama twist, and then back up the low road past Ellensburg. That's a pretty awesome road trip. But yeah, and Oregon too. I mean, anywhere in the American West is a pretty cool road trip. And have you done many on the east? I'd love to do a cultural road trip and check out all the old colonial
I would
spots.
love that too, or the Civil War battlefields and things. The problem with battlefields is they're just kind of fields when you actually get there. They're really not as exciting as they sound.
They're
But
former battlefields, now fields.
that's true. But from Denver, I've driven as far basically in a way that you can go in every location. I've driven Denver up to Bismarck, North Dakota. I've driven Denver to California. I've driven Denver to New York. I've driven to North Carolina. And then I've driven down all the way to South Padre Island in Texas. So really, all four directions I've driven. But there's still, the U.S. is just so gigantic. There's just stuff I've never done. I would love to do the Northeast and like Maine and those states that I'm not super familiar with that have a lot of history and a lot of great food when it comes to like lobster and stuff. I've never done that, but I would love to do more of the South too and do some historical stuff. I think would be really, really fun.
Well, you always hear about Vermont and Maine in the fall with the trees.
Yeah.
And if the cliches are true and it's amazing, then that might be a really fun time to do that one. But man, you got to drive up to Canada. I mean, actually driving from your place in Denver to us in BC would be one of the best road trips in the world. I mean, that would be insane.
It would. I think I've looked at it before. I can't remember how many hours it's up there. 16 or something?
I think it's 20, something like that. It's a long way. But I mean, the last time I flew to Denver from our place, we went over Wyoming. It's amazing. You'd go through Idaho. I think just a little aside, I think Idaho is the best US state I've been to. Completely underrated. I love Idaho, and I think their route, if I remember correctly, would take you through Idaho. So, yeah, one day we should do that. The debate is who drives which way, but we can figure it out. We'll have to. Oh no, what would we do? Because then one of our cars would need driving back. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Just thinking through the logistics. Quickly before we move on, because I want to plug a few road trips I've done elsewhere that I would really recommend. But any others that you'd like to add to the list? I've done.
I can't think of anything that I'm just absolutely dying to do in the U.S. right now as far as road trip because I've done so many. But I think for me, it's more states I'm not super familiar with that I would like to explore more of. I'd really like to explore Ohio more. I haven't really spent a lot of time there. I do love potatoes, so I probably would like Idaho like you do. But yeah, and I just some places I think would be so cool if they weren't so many people. Like California would be just probably the best. But road trips aren't fun if you're stuck with a bunch of cars and traffic either. So
no, you want the open road in front of you.
You want the open road for sure. But even driving through, I think a beautiful trip is driving Denver through the Rocky Mountains up through Grand Junction. When you go through Glenwood Springs, it's one of the prettiest sections of highway in the country. It's just gorgeous through there. And Utah is beautiful to drive through. Just all these rock formations, not crowded. That's a great place.
Not a ton of nightlife in Utah, but
no, it's bring your own beer and your own wives.
Multiple, yeah. When I remember one time we went in a liquor store in Utah and we went in a store and we wanted to buy liquor, and the guy kind of was so disapproving, and he opened this caged area that they only reserve for heathens who are going to hell, and allowed us to buy some incredibly weak beer, but he was judging the hell out of us. But
yeah, it's a weird place.
Utah's amazing.
Utah's amazing, and I've had weird experience too. Because a lot of the liquor stores in like Salt Lake City, they might all be government owned, and they're barely ever open. Their like hours are super low. And when the last time I went to one, they didn't have any coolers, so no beers cold, and you could only buy a 6 or 12 pack. You could only buy single beers. So if you wanted like 6 beers, like a 6-pack, you had to buy 6 single beers, and they'd like put them in a bag, and they weren't cold, and it's like bring your own beer when you drive through. They really do everything they can to discourage and discourage that. But the U.S. is just strange. I mean, even in North Carolina, where I've got family, there's still dry counties that you can't get alcohol in the county at all, and it's been that way forever. It's just, yeah, there's some really interesting and strange places in the United States that have a lot of differences, and that's part of the fun of driving through it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So,
where else do you want to go outside of the U.S.?
well, I was just going to say, I think basically we've concluded that everywhere in the US is great for road trips. Probably, I mean, even places like Minnesota would be great with in summer. Maybe there's got to be some bad places for road trips. I don't know, Illinois, Wisconsin. Maybe there's some places that aren't very interesting. It seems like anywhere you drive in America is going to be great.
I think Wisconsin's got some cool stuff because they've got all the great cheese, and then the Wisconsin Dells is like a really strange place. That's almost, God, it's hard to describe. It's like a giant tourist trap town that with all these weird things. There's some really cool stuff everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be fun to catch a Packers game as well.
Yeah.
But if I could just list, a couple of road trips that I would highly recommend. These are just plucked from my random experience. Adriatic coast, but the Croatian coast, I think, was amazing. A lot of islands there, so you can kind of go off the mainland and then onto an island and then stay on that island for a couple of days and move to the next one, go back onto the mainland. So that's one of those gems. Everyone heads to Italy for good reason because it's awesome. But I would say Croatia and the Adriatic coast, down to Gibraltar, from Slovenia all the way down to Dubrovnik, and if you want, you can carry on into Albania. That's pretty awesome. Some of the best. I really like snorkeling. Some of the best snorkeling I've ever done, and yeah, just beautiful beaches, not many people about, really reasonably priced, guaranteed good weather. It's great. Another one, highly recommended, partly because I lived there for 8 years, but anywhere in southwest France. If you are an outdoors person, there is more in southwest France than you can do in a lifetime. Whether it's Provence, I got so much love for Provence. Not a great place to road trip. All the roads are tiny. It takes ages to get anywhere, but you get a good glass of wine and a good coffee anywhere.
I love France in general, and that's something I would really like to do. Is spend, because I've been to Paris a few times. I've been to Nice and then down to Monaco, and then I did a Bordeaux trip, and I loved all of them. And I would really love to check out different cities in France. I just think it's such a cool place.
I'm going to retire in Provence, I've decided. I'm just going to buy a villa and just shuffle around down to the town square and get a little pan au raisin and an espresso every morning and just jump in my pool and lie in the sun. It's the most wonderfully quiet, slow, relaxing place. But yeah, as you mentioned, the coast, Monaco is. We should do a podcast on Monaco. It's such a bizarre place.
Yeah, we could.
And then obviously you've got the French Alps, which is where I lived for a long time. So many famous places, but Briançon and La Grave, that kind of area, Col de Lotterie, Col de Galibier, all around there, you basically can't. It's much better to be the passenger, so you can actually just stare out the window rather than having to focus on the road. So anywhere in southwest France. And then the final one that I'd recommend to anyone is New Zealand's South Island. Once you're outside Christchurch, and even Christchurch is pretty nice, but once you're outside Christchurch, it's all nice. Actually, once you're outside Christchurch and Dunedin, I was not big on Dunedin, but yeah, Queenstown, Arrowtown, Arthur's Pass, up the west coast, Nelson, Abel Tasman National Park. Basically, if you go anywhere in New Zealand that isn't within an hour of Christchurch or Dunedin, it's going to be absolutely stunning. There'll probably be no one there. And it's just an amazing place. Perhaps not culturally the most interesting place. I wouldn't say anyone goes to New Zealand to sample the culture, but the South Island must be one of the most uniquely beautiful places in the world. The scenery is unlike anywhere else. You get those cobalt blue lakes kicking up straight into huge glaciated mountains, and it's just it's a really special place. I mean, Lord of the Rings.
I was going to say Lord of the Rings.
New Zealand was made for Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Or Lord of the Rings was made for New Zealand. So, yeah, a little shout out to to New Zealand.
Yeah, I'm going to New Zealand next month, but I'm going to Auckland, and my son and I are going to go to the Shire and see where they filmed The Hobbit and stuff. So we're really excited about that. And we're going to that rugby game that you recommended.
Yeah, I mean, this is amazing. So for a bit of context, 2002-03, I spent a year in New Zealand, which was my year out between high school and university. So most people can probably do the maths on my age from that. And I lived in Christchurch for a year, and we used to go and watch the Crusaders, which is the local professional rugby team. And back then they had, I think, 11 of the All Blacks played for the Crusaders. And the big rivalry is with the Auckland Blues. And it turns out that when you're in New Zealand, the Blues, Auckland, are playing my team, the Crusaders. And you're going. I just love that you're going, 23 years after I went?
Yeah.
Albeit you're going in Auckland, I went in Christchurch. But hey, same thing. I think it's awesome. You'll have a great time.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I don't totally understand rugby. I know you've tried to explain it to me in the past, but I'll just enjoy it.
Yeah, it won't really matter. You get the atmosphere, and that is kind of the big rivalry is Auckland and Christchurch. So you see in one of the big grudge games. So yeah, it'll be so fun.
Yeah. Well, and some of the places that I think would make such awesome road trips, unfortunately, just dangerous. Like, yeah. I would love to drive through like South America. But I wouldn't do it. I would love to drive through Africa, but I wouldn't do it.
No, it would. You and I have been to North Korea, as we've covered on this podcast. Yes. I do mountain sports at a level where it's dangerous and you can get killed, but I don't like doing stuff where it's just kind of random. You're just driving down the road in Africa at the wrong time of day, and some guy jumps out, and suddenly it's
or there's a checkpoint, and they mow you down with machine guns because you don't have what you need, or you don't know what rival group is in charge of that little area and stuff. And it's really a shame because it would be so cool to do, but.
Yeah, I always find human danger more intimidating than natural danger. Because it's kind of with natural danger, you can kind of put yourself in the position, or you can calculate the risk a bit more. But I agree, those ones where you're just kind of hoping no one does anything to you, I'm not really into that.
Yeah.
So come on, let's hear some dream road trips.
I think because I didn't love driving across Italy because I found it probably like you were talking about earlier in France, like stressful on these little roads. Totally, I didn't really feel like I saw the scenery because I was so paying attention to what I was doing, and I was out of my country or out of what I'm used to, and then dealing with toll roads. And I probably have more desire to road trip more in the United States, and in other countries, just go visit or be a passenger or take a train or something and not rent a car and drive around. It just doesn't super interest me, to be honest. I love trains, I think partly because we don't really have a good system in the United States. So sitting on a train and watching the countryside go by, I would love to do more of that, like in Japan. If, it'd be fun to do the Trans-Siberian Railroad at some point, if that all calms down. Europe is amazing for that stuff, but I don't know. I know that's not very exciting, but I just don't really have a huge desire to rent a car in England and go drive around and get in a head-on accident when I turn the wrong way. And it's just, and then if you get pulled over and you can't speak the language, and it's just.
No, I get it.
The U.S. it's kind of the same way where like, I live in Denver, so I'm right by the Rocky Mountains, and I've got property up in the mountains, so I can get to an hour and a half. So it's like I'm generally not going to fly across the world to go see a mountain when I've got these amazing mountains right by my house. Like if I'm there and there's mountains, that's great, but it's just not something I'm probably going to do. And I want to get some different experiences that I can't get here.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm just looking at my list of dream road trips, and I'd put Central Asia because I think it'd be amazing to drive kind of Iran to. God, my geography is going to fail me. But drive east from Iran and cross Afghanistan and Pakistan. But I think it's one of those
that would
things,
be great.
Or Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, but I think it's one of those things where actually it would just suck. I actually don't think it would be fun at all, but I like the idea of doing it, but like you say, as soon as you introduce a rental car and different languages and bribing border guards, it's actually not nearly as fun as it sounds. So I might scrub that Central Asia one off, and maybe we'll take the Trans-Siberian one day if Russia calms down.
And then you gotta bring your own beer again. The Central Asia too. There are so many awesome historical sites in those countries, from the Roman Empire, from the Arabic and Persian empires, and there's so many amazing ruins from a couple thousand years ago in those areas. And it would be so cool if the climate was different and you could drive from, thing to thing to thing and really learn about all those cultures. But this is not possible right now. I mean, there's tons of cool stuff in Syria. In Syria, there's really cool historic sites. In Yemen, there's really cool historic sites. In Afghanistan, even though they've destroyed a lot of the stuff, like they blew up those Buddhas and stuff, it really would be cool to do some of that. But it's just not the right time. But you never know, because there was a time in the 70s when Afghanistan was the road trip place for a bunch of hippies, and they would go out there and they would go do this trail, and now you can't go at all, and times change. You just, you go someplace and it's super safe, and 10 years later it's a disaster, and 10 years later it's super safe again. So you really have to take advantage of places when they are safe, and then when they are nice, and go have those experiences, because you never know what's going to happen. I went to the Ukraine, and I wouldn't go to the Ukraine now, of course, but I had a great trip there years ago, and hopefully it gets back. I think
the problem with that Central Asia, I think the problem with a lot of places, I mean, I think Africa's never really, or much of Africa, certainly Central Africa, Horn of Africa, has never been that great, but
yeah.
Certainly in recent memory. But the problem with that Central Asian belt is one country suddenly is okay for a couple of decades, but never all the ones would line up. You'd always be hitting one country that would make you think, oh no, I'm not really sure I want to drive through that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So maybe you could pick a country at a time. I'm sure we seem to recommend a lot of books on here. I'm sure I recommended it to you, The Places in Between.
I read it.
The guy that walked across Afghanistan. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But for anyone listening, that's an amazing book. It's written by a guy called Rory Stewart. The Places in Between. He walked across Afghanistan. This is post-invasion. I think it's late 2003, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. And he is now rivaling us for podcasting, because him and Alistair Campbell, who was Tony Blair's closest advisor, have the #1 ranked podcast in the UK. But we're coming for him. But yeah, Rory Stewart, The Places in Between, highly recommended book about Afghanistan. Kind of makes me want to go, and also makes me really not want to go.
Well, we walked across Taipei, and I think that's pretty similar.
Similar distance, similar risk level to just wandering into an Afghan village. Yeah.
I mean, it took us a whole day.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to remember how long it took him to cross Afghanistan. I think it was about 3 months. Anyway, it's an amazing book, and it's kind of the most rugged, daring traveling you could ever do. So, yeah, Central Asia. I think I've got 2 more. I think we've both got one in Australia. You want to go right through the middle, hey?
Yeah, I think and I was just thinking about that when you said that. If there's one road trip in the world I really want to do, I want to drive through the middle of Australia. No, I don't want to, and I love my alone time, and I love road tripping by myself too, because I just like listening to music and just enjoying my alone time. But that's when I'd want to do with somebody. So when the car breaks down and I'm running out of water and there's some crazy person trying to kill me in the outback, like that. Did you ever see that movie Wolf Creek?
No.
It's a great movie. It's based on a true story, but it's like these people out there, and their car breaks down, and this like evil Crocodile Dundee guy basically kidnaps them, but it's actually based on a true story. You should watch it. If you get scared, you can text me, and I'll keep you company.
I don't like movies like that, because when I road trip, I like to just kind of pull off and find somewhere random to camp in the woods. So I don't like watching things like the Blair Witch Project. My imagination is already bad enough.
Or The Hills Have Eyes. I'm always, or Deliverance. It's like, I'm always worried about, inbred cannibals when I'm driving around, that they're gonna set a trap for me or something and get me. But
I mean, the bigger problem in Australia is everything is trying to kill you.
I know.
They've got everything poisoned, and New Zealand's got nothing poisoned.
Oh, really?
There's basically no predators in it. No, you basically nothing's going to kill you in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And in Australia, bloody everything's trying to kill you.
New Zealand, there were those giant flightless birds that were there until, I don't know, a few thousand years ago, and then they were all killed off. And giant eagles that fed on those birds, on those other birds and stuff. There was some really cool stuff in New Zealand, but that's good to know, because I do not like, when I went to Australia, I do not like weird bugs that are going to like kill me or poison me. And I don't like, they have spiders in Australia that will rear back and hiss at you. No thanks.
I'm not.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I came amazingly close just out the back of my house in BC to treading on a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
In October, and it still gives me the creeps when I think about it. I was jogging and I don't know how close I got, really, really close, and it got up, and as I started backing away, it kind of began to follow me with its rattle going.
Wow, that is scary.
Yeah, I was really not into you. So that would be the issue with Australia. But what is it that appeals to you about that trip?
The danger.
Just the thought of lying in your tent and a bug getting in.
No, I don't want to. I'm not going to get sleep in a tent. No. I came pretty close to giving some a long string of cuss words. I do not want to sleep in a tent in Australia with weird bugs and spiders and great white sharks trying to kill me. Like I mean,
it's not like if you go across the middle of Australia, you're probably good for great whites, but the others, yeah.
You never know. Like, I saw Sharknado. Like, you never know what's going to happen down there. I would either want to sleep in my car because it's got windows that I can roll up and hard-sided doors, or I would want to sleep in a hotel. But yeah, I do not want to sleep in a tent in Australia. No, thank you. But
what's the appeal? Go on.
I already told you the danger. And I think just the fact there's very few places in the world that you can really go out and you're literally in the middle of nowhere that haven't really been explored. I know Australia's been explored, but I just don't feel like it would feel like it. And you're just so far out where you've got to take extra gas cans and supplies with you and stuff. And I think it's cool too, because you're going from somewhere to somewhere. You're not just like driving, like you could do that in Canada. You could just drive north, but you're driving from somewhere to nowhere and back. Australia, you're at least driving from somewhere cool through all this interesting, crazy, dangerous stuff to somewhere cool again. So there's like a place, an end in sight, and I think it's really neat. And I don't know anyone that's done it. You know, most things I know people that have done different things, but I don't know anybody who's ever been like, oh, I just took a vacation and I drove all the way through the middle of Australia. Like,
yeah, but it's so big. It's the size of the US, isn't it? So going from Perth across to Sydney or Brisbane or wherever you want to, or Melbourne or wherever you want to end up.
Yeah.
It's thousands of miles. You need weeks to do it, unless you're just going to put your foot down. But really, what's the point of just sitting and putting your foot down? So
yeah.
No, that's interesting. I mean, the road trip I've had recommended to me in Australia is the South Coast.
Okay.
But the same thing. There's just nothing. So my friend went on a surfing trip, and he said you'd hear about a break, and it'd be an hour down a dirt road from a town, and he'd drive down with his girlfriend and in their van, and they'd stay until their food ran out, 3-4 days just surfing on the beach, and then wouldn't see anyone or anything, and then go and restock in the town or carry on along the south coast and find another great place. But again, just going back to great whites, he said there are tons of great whites, and I said, so you're just on your own in the water? And he goes, yeah, my girlfriend wasn't as into surfing as me, so sometimes she'd just stay in the van and I'd go out. So he's out on the south coast of Australia. It's basically the Southern Ocean. You can't get any wilder. There's no way I would be paddling around on a surfboard. Imagine if there's a riptide you didn't know about. What if you just get pulled out to sea? Or what if you just... It's full of great whites. I'm not going out surfing.
Well, and even if not great whites, it's like poisonous jellyfish and stuff. And I don't like being in the water if my feet aren't touching the ground anyways, because I start having like thinking of all kinds of weird things underneath me. But when I went to Australia, and I remember I went to a beach, and I'm in the water, and I look up, and there's planes flying, little planes flying over with all these like sirens hanging off the wings, and it says like Shark Patrol painted on the bottom of the wings. And I was like, if they see basically a shark from a plane, and then they set off these alarms, everyone runs out. And I was thinking, how big does a shark have to be for someone to see it from a plane? Like, no way. And I was like, I am out of here. And I just went back on the beach and thought, there's ways that I don't really want to die, but if I have to pick a way to die, it's not getting eaten by a great white shark.
I'm exactly the same. If I'm snorkeling and I suddenly, snorkeling around some interesting rock formations, and then I suddenly snorkel to a bit where I can't see the bottom, I almost have a panic attack.
Yeah, I don't like
that I just can't. Oh, I can't stand it. I have to just pull my face out of the water and swim back to where I could last see the bottom.
I really prefer like a really nice bath with a bottle of champagne or a hot tub with like a Mai Tai. I feel like is way better than swimming around in the ocean. But
yeah, I'm not a water person at all. But it's funny,
which is weird because you're from an island.
I know.
You're like an islander.
Familiarity just makes you comfortable with stuff. I mean, you drop me off in a helicopter somewhere snowy where there's avalanches. I'm good. I'm in my element. But yeah, you get me in a beach in Australia thinking about sharks. No way.
Yeah, I agree. So that's my. Where would your number one in the world be?
Probably that barbecue tour of the Deep South. I've been slightly put off. I really want to go to the north coast of Canada because I think it'd be amazing. It might be romanticizing it because it's a gravel road for about 500 miles. So it might actually be crap, but to go to the north coast of Canada appeals. But you saying, well, you're just going somewhere and then coming back actually made me think, oh yeah. So I think
sorry to ruin your fantasy.
But just to go from, I don't know, Phoenix to Miami, but just crossing the whole of the Deep South, and but you need weeks.
I know.
I want to go to a college football game every weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, you need 6 weeks. So sadly, it's going to have to wait. But probably that one. How about you?
I would say I don't know if there's anything else that I would love to do that actually, and love to see the South more. I feel like I've done a lot in the United States. I don't know. I'm pretty good. I mean, even just a few weeks ago, I drove from North Carolina to Denver, which was about 22-hour drive. So I've done that pretty recently, and I'll likely this summer do some other long road trips. So I do a fair amount of road trips. I do Denver to Vegas sometimes, about 12 hours. I really love, getting some tea, listen to music I like, and getting in my car and driving someplace I really, really love that.
Yeah, I'm with you. That seems like a nice way to wrap up an episode about road trips. I think the best thing about the bottom line about road trips is just do one. You've done so many just from your door.
Yes.
And I know you live in the center of the best road trip country in the world, but even so, just get in your car and drive, and something cool will happen, is my experience.
Yes. Get in your Mini Cooper.
Unless you live in Kabul or Islamabad, then something cool might not happen.
Yeah. Some of us said are just fortunate with where we live. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very fortunate, and we should enjoy it more. Yeah. Well, that was fun.
It was fun.
I know you've got a trip coming up down to Austin, so
yep, I'm leaving Austin.
We should talk all things Texas soon.
Oh yeah, I would love to do that. Have you been to Austin?
I've never been to Texas.
You've never been to Texas?
I've never been to no.
Oh my God, that's
why I want to. That's
really embarrassing.
Why me and you need to win the lottery, take 6 weeks off, and just do a barbecue in college football.
Well, next time you come to Denver, if you have time, we can drive to Amarillo, Texas, in 6.5 hours.
Yeah, I don't want to just tick the box. I want to go to Texas. I really want to spend some time there. But I mean, still be fun for sure. We should do that.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I think you'd like that. But yeah.
Oh, you got me all. I'm all fired up for road trips, and I'm sitting here in the middle of this big metropolis. It's killing me.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, I'm off to I'm off to do what you wouldn't do and go and explore the nightlife of Toronto.
Yeah, let me know how that goes. I'm sure it's epic.
All right, we'll speak next week. Enjoy Texas.
Thank you. Take care.